We have seats over here too. Folks coming in, we have some seats over here.
Looks great.
Getting to the bathrooms is like going to a baseball game, huh? Hello, everybody. I'm Steve Kurtok. I was a friend of George's and his family. Can you hear me okay? Great. What a shock. Why George? On behalf of the family, of George's family, I want to welcome all of you here. This is a celebration of George's life. If you're feeling at all like me, I've got so many emotions going on inside right now. I rushed to get here this morning, and I wondered if all of you would just take a couple of moments to relax, get centered, be here in this place, all of us together. So if you would, let's just take a few moments, close your eyes, breathe from your belly, and be in this space, in this moment, with all of us who loved George. This is a poem by an unknown author, and it's titled, "Don't Cry for Me." Don't cry for me, now I have. Showing Don't cry for me, now I have died, for I'm still here. I'm by your side. My body's gone, but my soul is here. Please don't shed another tear. I am still here. I'm all around. Only my body lies here. I am the snowflake that kisses your nose. I am the frost that nips your toes. I am the sun bringing you light. I am the star shining so bright. I am the rain refreshing the earth. I am the laughter. I am the mirth. I am the bird up in the sky. I am the cloud that's drifting by. I am the thoughts inside your head. While I'm still there, I can't be dead. George was an amazing guy, right? I would just like to ask all of us a question. What was special about George? A word, a sentence. And I'm asking you, what was special about George?
Everything.
Smile.
Everything.
Everything, thank you.
His heart.
His heart, thank you.
His great laugh.
His great goofy laugh. What else? What was special that you remember about George?
He was always at peace. He was always at peace.
He was always at peace.
He led by example.
He led by example. Thank you.
He was so playful.
He was so playful. What else?
He loved his family.
Music and art.
Music and art.
Is almost reckless, but thoroughly thought out willingness to try anything.
Interesting balancing act. What else?
His love for life.
His love for life.
He didn't sweat the small stuff.
Didn't sweat the small stuff. Wow, is that a blessing or what?
His hugs.
His hugs.
He could hug.
Good hugger.
His liking for putting things on his head.
Everyone hear that?
His support for others. His support for others.
His support for others. His selflessness.
His many amazing stories.
Thank you.
His jokes and riddles.
Impersonation.
He was such a special man, and that's why we're all here. I don't know about the rest of you, but when I arrived here, I went right here. And the first thought I had was, where's George? George isn't there anymore. Where is George now? I know George wasn't a particularly religious man, but he was a spiritual man. So I would just like to ask another question, which is, where is the spirit of George right now that it's left his body?
Within us. Within us.
Within us. Where else is his spirit right now?
In our memory, in our hearts.
In our memory and in
hearts.
our hearts.
He's in the back of the hall making jokes.
Did you ever meet a goofier guy than George? Yeah. Though he might be behaving himself. Where else is George? Yes.
In every smile and every laugh.
In every smile and every laugh. Absolutely. Yes.
With Dolores.
With Dolores. Do you all know who Dolores was?
Laura.
Laura. Okay. Where else is his spirit right now?
Right here.
I feel him right here. I feel this whole room. I feel the presence of George in this entire room. And that's why we're here today. One of the amazing things about George was that he belonged to so many different circles of friends. I knew George through parties. Thanksgiving. Probably been at 100 parties with him. but all of you here knew him in a lot of different ways. And the beauty of this experience that we're going to have together in loving you, George, is to hear the broad spectrum of who George was. So, Georgie, enjoy the show. There are about 17 of you that would like to speak this afternoon. Probably about 5 minutes, something like that. I'll keep track of time. Shorter is good too. But thank you for all of you being here and celebrating the life of George Atkins. Ted, would you come up?
Sure.
Can you stand or
Thanks to everybody for coming today. I know George through my wife, Rhea, so I'm essentially a brother-in-law, I guess, of George, and I've known him for about 7 years, and he was really a truly special person to us. So I had collected some information about George's life and put together this statement, kind of a eulogy for him. And I think what's amazing is that having read all the things that people have written over the last week, 2 weeks, I thought I knew George, but I'm still coming to know George. And I think I'll be getting to know George the rest of my life, which is really a blessing, I think. And so some of this touches on what is part of George's history, but there's so much more of it which is in everybody that's here, which is really, truly amazing. So, George Calvin Atkins was born in Toledo, Ohio, January 17th, 1957, following his older sister, Deborah, of 2 years, and starting this amazing life's journey, which we were blessed to share with him. He passed away suddenly and unexpectedly on September 29th, 2019, at the age of 62, leaving this world, but never our hearts. All of those who knew George, his family and dearest friends, celebrate his life, his laughter, his warmth, his generosity, and above all, his unbounded love for us all. We know that George is reaching out to us right now with open hands, commanding that we be healed, laughing with that sparkle in his wide eyes. His magic will always be part of us and who we are. George's mother was a teacher and his father a policeman, and they raised in George a truly genuine and graceful human being whose love for knowledge and love for life and love for others touched so many lives. George was an artist, he was an engineer, he was a lawyer, but above all, he was an inquisitive explorer who spent his life learning and creating, sharing, and connecting. George studied art and photography at Cornell, then he moved to New Mexico, and then to Berkeley to study engineering and computer science, ultimately making California his home. And really, it's only in the last couple of days that I realized that he had collected degrees from all of these various places, so it was impressive. George worked at Sun and Oracle for many years, but then he returned to study at Santa Clara University to complete his law degree, graduating in 2013. George passed the California bar and then spent time as a public defender and then settled into a position at the U.S. Patent Office, where he combined his engineering and legal skills to serve the public. To honor George, his commitment to social justice and to Santa Clara University, the Santa Clara University School of Law will be setting up a summer scholarship in George's name, and I think we'll have some people speaking to that later. George never lost his desire to learn, to explore, to create, and to touch the lives of each and every one of the people around him. From photography, writing, reading Greek classics in the original, making a movie, doing gymnastics and martial arts, playing music, and then DJing as Buddy Love at KFJC, George joyously embraced all of these opportunities in his life, and his joy was a glowing light in all of our lives. This is the hard part for me. And he sang to us, sometimes in person, sometimes in recordings, and sometimes along with Britney Spears. But always with sincerity and passion. George was kind and gentle, thoughtful of others, and selflessly he gave his time to help. And he was just so funny and so dear, hamming it up in spontaneous Star Wars takeoffs or imitating Jimmy Stewart in It's a Wonderful Life to raise funds for KFJC, or just recounting stories to all of us. George kept many of us connected to the latest news stories in his favorite papers, the New York Times and the Washington Post, and he gently nudged us towards adopting electric cars. He tantalized us with his fascination for fine watches, and he reminded us of the importance of the ACLU and his favorite candidate, Kamala Harris. He's left all of us a treasury of memories and an example of how to live a joyful and wondrous life. George is survived by his spouse, Corey Sharma, his sister, Deborah Atkins Bowling, his brother-in-law, Albert F. Bowling, his niece and nephew, Stephanie and Adrian Bowling, as well as his extended family in his sister-in-law, Gayatri Sharma, me, her husband, Ted Jaretsky, and our children, Stefan and Sophia Rimola, and Max and Katja Jaretsky. Thanks.
Thank you, Ted. Ellen Kreisberg, would you come up, please?
Good afternoon. I'm a professor at Santa Clara Law School, so usually speaking to a large group is not that hard for me, but today's a little bit different, but I promise not to call on any of you today. I got to know George. I don't even remember exactly how we met, but our paths just suddenly collided. Under most circumstances, he and I would not cross paths. My background is criminal defense law, social justice, public interest. His background was engineering, patents, trademarks. I didn't know those students, they didn't know me, but somehow George and I crossed paths. And as we did, we began to talk about public interest work and criminal justice and social justice. And it was so clear to me that while a lot of his training and his professional direction and skills may have been in the area of engineering and patents, that his heart and his passion was really all about criminal justice, about social justice, about civil rights, about helping those who had no voice. And George wanted to be a voice for many of them. Here today is also another professor, Heather Angove, who really became very instrumental with a lot of George's social justice work at Santa Clara, because we started an expungement clinic, because trying to give people who'd been convicted of crimes, who had stayed out of trouble, a second chance. You can imagine that was something right along George's alley. He was part of the first clinic that we did at Santa Clara with Heather, and was just passionate about it. And he and his client developed such a rapport that his client used to come back to subsequent clinics to talk to classes, to help with mock arguments, to participate in classes, because he was so moved and inspired by how George had changed his life. Not only did George go into court and argue on behalf of them, but then he would come back subsequent semesters and was a research assistant and helped coordinate the subsequent programs. So not only when we talk about where is George and where is he, there are people now who can get better jobs, who can get better pay, who can live in certain places because their convictions have been sealed, because their lives had changed, and George was willing to make that happen. As George and I would talk, that's when he would talk about suddenly maybe following the career of being a public defender. And I used to tease him mercilessly about that, because I said, you can go make a lot of money. And but that didn't really, that wasn't really what drove him. I mean, what drove him is what would excite him, and how could he make a difference in this world. George was certainly different. He was smart, but he was funny, he was kind, and he was caring. And I feel like I am a better person for having known him, and I know he has changed the lives of not only his fellow law students, the professors who got in touch with him, but the clients that he met along the way. Oh, one last thing on the scholarship, Gory asked me to mention, we're gonna post to try and put together a summer scholarship for students at Santa Clara who are doing pro bono work, and we'd like to do one in George's name next summer. So I'll be in touch with Gory about how people, if they want to participate in that, a George Atkins Summer Fellowship in 2020 for a student who will work full-time without pay otherwise, doing some sort of public interest, social justice work that I know that George would embrace. So stay tuned. Thank you.
Thank you very much. For those of you who are speaking, and I come up and hover by you, and kind of, you know, the old days they'd have a cane, you know, and pull you off the stage. We're not. Bruce Jacobs.
Hi, I'm Bruce Jacobs. I'm George's first cousin and de facto brother, basically. We both had sisters and we grew up as each other's brothers. And there are a whole bunch of folks from our family who are here in this room, all of whom have known and loved George all their lives. So I won't be long, because what says the most about my cousin is that if you walk around this room, you will talk with all aspects of life from all directions in beautiful ways. What I'll tell you is that I, like you, am in complete shock. So much so that it would not surprise me at all if my cousin George sat up, took off the damn hat, and got out of the casket and walked around laughing that George laugh, like, oh, I got you this time, huh? I got you, huh? That's very good. Then you do the Python thing, you know, like, oh, hey, you got you, but George was always about the unexpected, always. All our years together, growing up, getting in trouble, running away from people whose cars we threw snowballs at, running away from dogs. Remember the dog in the alley we thought was going to eat us and just leave our clothes in Toledo? And especially once he was a teenager, he was all about the unexpected. I'm going to tell you one story, just one. Our cousin Johnny, who's not here, told me. I don't remember it, but I think it's true. We were at a big family gathering. George, Johnny, and I, three cousins, went out to the drugstore to do something. We came back, and our cousin Jennifer, who's not here, was sitting at a table. Oh, while we were out, George bought a box of condoms at the drugstore. And we were maybe teenagers, right? George comes in, we all come in. George immediately makes a beeline for the table where Jennifer is sitting with her mother, my cousin Marguerite, who's right there, opens the bag, dumps the condoms on the table in front of Jennifer, and says, hey Jennifer, hey, here are those condoms you wanted me to pick up for you. I don't remember it either, but it's just like George, and I'm sure that it happened. So there are a million things I could tell you that I won't. George could be infuriating. He was completely and utterly George, and that's the thing I love and respect most about him, is that everything he did, even if it was stuff that was inconvenient for you emotionally or personally, which sometimes happened, was not about anything but just being genuinely George, just opening up and taking in the world from this hunger and this passion that he had to do it from. It was as if being George was an art form. That's the way I feel about it. And he had to be true to the art of being George. Just 3 days ago, I asked him for advice about something, and he gave it to me. He gave it to me. It was really good advice. Saved me some therapy money, but that's another story. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that we're all here because the George we loved and love and will always love is a person we'll never find again in this world and in this universe. And every day I am grateful for having grown up with him, been in a family with him, been close to him, gotten in trouble with him, imbibed substances about which I will not elaborate with him, done a lot of things with him. So I'll close by saying to you, George, and to all of you here, but especially to you, George Kelvin Atkins, after I am done smacking you around, when you get up out of the casket and walk around and explain to us why you carried on this elaborate, shriekingly bizarre joke. After I'm done smacking you, I will hug you, and I will thank you, and I will hold you forever.
Lean, yes.
Hello, everyone. I'm here today with my mom. We came out from Ithaca, New York, and I'm also speaking on behalf of my sisters who couldn't be here today, Daisy and Shyla. George has been a presence in our lives, our entire lives, and he became our family. He frequently came to visit us and became like an uncle. And what we most took away is the incredible joy he spread to us. As kids, he was so magical to be around. He just with handstands all the time, every other second, and he would leapfrog over parking meters and take us out for pizza and have water gun fights, and he was just always so supportive, and he never let a single birthday go by without a card or a note or a phone call. I'm not sure how he always remembered everybody's birthday, but it was pretty special. He really taught us how to embrace life, how he kept, every time I talked to him, he had picked up something new, some amazing new hobby that it was never enough. Like he never thought, okay, I'm done learning, I'm done experiencing. He always wanted to do new things, and that was a really great lesson for us kids to learn. Especially for me, he was very special because when I was 21 or so, about 15 years ago, I was in a very rough spot. He let me come live with him for several months in Berkeley, and I'm not exaggerating that he really saved my life, and that was the kind of person he was, just very generous. I have a lot of other, fun, amazing stories about him, like I'm sure everybody does. I remember that we watched Obama get elected, and we decided to play a drinking game of taking a shot for each state Obama won. We eventually had to stop. Too much. I know that election was really special for both of us, and I was glad I got to share that with him. Anyway, we're glad to be here, and I'm glad to see so many people here who love George too.
Rhea.
Hello everyone, I'm Rhea, Gauri's sister. And it's not fair that I have to go after so many good speakers. It's totally unfair. If I'd known, I would have changed the order. So, but I'm determined to make a speech. When George passed the bar and we had a party at home, I was so choked up I couldn't make a speech at that time. Some of you might remember. I started crying then. I don't know what I was crying about that time. So now I have reason, but I'm going to make it through the speech. So it might go stop and slow, whatever, but I'm going to get through this. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm not a professor, I'm not a public speaker, so Toastmasters was long ago. So anyway, George was my brother-in-law, and I have to thank Gauri, my sister, for bringing him into our lives. I don't think I ever thanked you. He was more than a brother-in-law. Obviously, he was a brother and a best friend. 3 in 1. I think anyone in the room beat. He was a 3 in 1 to me. My friend Jackie said, take deep breaths, go slow. So when I first met George about 25 years ago, I knew he was different. So he worked at Sun Microsystems, highly paid Silicon Valley engineer, but he didn't own a car. And we were like, he doesn't own a car. Somebody doesn't own a car. It's so weird. Silicon Valley, everyone in California, everyone owned a car. But he would take the bus down from Berkeley on weekends to meet her. He loved her that much, right? Taking a bus down from Berkeley or public transport, she would pick him up. Where's George? She's going to pick him up. You know, whatever. It was all very complicated. So we all know that he was a zero emissions ambassador, as he was recently called, and he kept sending us, you know, every day we would get something about how Tesla is going to take over the world and how we all needed to get a Bolt. So now they had 2 Bolts in their garage, but the funny thing is that he would still take the bus. I think you might have seen some pictures. He still took the bus, and he still rode his bike into public transportation. I remember Gauri was calling somebody, telling him about George's passing, and the person said, "What do you mean he just passed away? He just rode the bike. He was so healthy." And was like, "Yes, he was so healthy. He liked taking the bike." So I think he did it for the environment, but I also think he did it because he actually liked being with people. He liked being with people, not sitting in a Tesla, going from point A to point B. He wasn't an armchair feminist. He wasn't an armchair feminist either. But he wasn't an armchair environmentalist where he would just tell people what to do and, you know, feel proud of doing the right thing by driving a Tesla or, you know, something like that. He actually liked to be with the people. He liked to be with humanity. He liked to give energy to people, and I think he got energy being with different kinds of people. As we can see here, we're all so different, yet we're all here together, right? And I think that's to his credit. So George actually lived his values, right? Like I was saying, he actually lived his values. One year, funny story, which I think is funny enough, you've probably all heard it many times. It was my daughter's Sophia's birthday, and you know, I always get busy at these things. And I said, "George, can you run out to get the ice cream cake from Atkins?" So he was my go-to person whenever I needed something. He was the go-to person. He said, "Of course." So off he goes, and then he comes back into the house with an ice cream cake. And then later on, I realized he'd actually come on his bike. He walked to Baskin Robbins down Blossom Hill Road, come back riding his bike and with ice cream cake, a huge sheet of ice cream cake on one hand. He could have just borrowed the car. No, but he had to prove that, you know, you can get around on a bike. And it's a good thing he had those large hands, right? And it's like, you could do that. So, you know, the be healed, I think. He was just very kind. He made each one of us feel special. At random moments, I would get texts from him, like, "How are you doing? How are things?" Sometimes he'd say, "So what are you doing on Saturday?" "Nothing special." So he said, "Okay, I'll be by." Okay. He would come by, this tool belt, I think he liked to wear the tool belt. and he would change out the batteries of my smoke alarm. That's it. I mean, you just come and change out the batteries of smoke alarm, or, I mean, it's a mundane example, but the point is that he cared for others and he actually thought about their safety, right? He didn't just think about you on special occasions, didn't just do those big things that we all think, you know, somebody cares for me, they do the big things. He did the little things. I think that's what he did. I'm sure you all have examples, so, or the little things that he did for you, which added up to George. And he always had that giant smile on his face, right? He change the batteries and say, okay, you know, next date this, okay, we're going to do this again a year from now. And I was like, oh, you do it a year from now. And he would. I always got a Mother's Day card from him. I don't know how many men send their moms Mother's Day cards, or boys or daughters, but I always got one from him. And I got a Valentine's Day card, and then I got a birthday card, and it was very annoying to us because he would always wish people first. So my mom, who's in India, we'd all get up, it's like, oh, I have to wish mommy. And he already wished her because, you know, he was keeping track of, they were ahead of us, you know, who's in which time zone, and he would always wish them first. It was very annoying. There was no point competing on that count. He always remembered, I think somebody just mentioned that too. So we all know about his many degrees. Like Ted said, he collected degrees. We didn't realize when he said that I went to Cornell, I went to Berkeley, I went to New Mexico, that he was actually getting degrees. He wasn't just going there and, you know, saying, oh, I don't like this, I'm going to go somewhere else. He was always starting something, but also completing things as he went. He was a lover of languages, musician, but I don't think that's why we all like him so much. We didn't say, oh, this guy is so accomplished, so smart, so brilliant, and that's why we love him. We love him because he was uncomplicated, unpretentious. If you had a relationship with him, that's what it was. It was just that. He didn't like you because you had a particular pedigree or degree. You were just you. It was just one-on-one. He would get down on the floor and play with the kids, right? So when my kids were little, Stefan was, of course, always being healed. And Sophie was always like, pick me up, pick me up. And some of kids that he knew are here today because they felt compelled to be here. And it's because he loved all the kids. So when he would join a party, he would go hang out with the kids. 4th of July at Steve's house, he would hang out with Caitlin, and maybe Kellen wasn't in the picture at that time, and he would be telling them stories, and he'd tell us all stories, and keep everyone amused. And some parent once told me that, I don't remember who it was, they said, I don't think my child realizes that George is not a kid. He just thought he was just another kid. And George was always looking for the next thing to accomplish. There were no endings for him, there were only beginnings. And whatever he did with gusto and to the fullest. If you haven't seen it, you should look out for the video when he's sitting down to watch a TV show, right? So he was not a snob. He watched TV. He saw every movie. He was watching Law and Order. He's settling down. I mean, for a 1-hour TV show to give it your all, that's, we give it our all to big things, but he would give it to a 1-hour TV show. He's thoroughly enjoying it. He's taking pleasure from watching TV. But like I said, nothing was too little or too big. Studying Latin wasn't enough for him. He had to read the Bible in both Greek and Latin. They're on display over there. And we all know that we always got birthday cards from him. They were written in the Greek alphabet. We all know how to recognize the names, and that's all we know. We don't know all the rest of it that he would translate it for us. There was absolutely no limit to George's capacity to absorb new hobbies or knowledge. He had a bachelor's and master's degree in engineering, went on to get law degrees and passed the bar. He played the piano, guitar, harmonica, performed belly dancing, did gymnastics, and he had a certain way about him. Who else does a handstand in front of the Taj Mahal? You have to see that if you haven't yet seen it. He was funny and he possessed a wealth of general knowledge. Whenever I hear birds chirping in my backyard, I would remember George convincing me that there weren't that many birds. It was just one mockingbird who was imitating other bird sounds. And I would pretend not to believe him, and we would argue, and it was just our thing. We did that. It was a little ritual, and I will surely miss that ritual, so maybe somebody else can step in and fill that. But he would do it every time. That was a funny thing, and he knew, that I would argue back, and that was a pleasure of it. And then he would start making the bird sounds himself. That was the other thing. He would like to make bird sounds. He was a life of our family get-togethers. George would walk in, take off his size 13 shoes, and immediately the mood would lighten and the party would start. He would tell a funny story, or ceremoniously bow low and offer us a gift wrapped in fancy gift paper. And it could usually something very useful, like an outdoor surge protector. And of course, he gave the best wholesome hugs, we know that, right? So everybody would get a hug at a party for him, and then everyone's like, at peace, okay, let's start. He was very perceptive and recognized nuances in cultures and people. He had a gift for taking on different personalities simply by putting on a different headdress. Again, watch his videos, you will see what I mean. Luckily, Gauri recorded all his silliness. And we would get so annoyed at her, it's like, put away the camera. But thank God she didn't, right? So don't listen to people who tell you that. It's all his silliness was on display for us. What we don't have is his chipmunk impersonation. Did you all see his chipmunk impersonation? Oh my God, it was awesome. He would go on 5 minutes and something like that, right? My son says that George had perfected the Indian head nod better than some Indians. If you all don't know any Indians, look out for them and watch the head nod. George did it better than some Indians. So George had an amazingly positive attitude, right, about life, probably because he actually tried to do something about, instead of just moaning and groaning about life and all the injustices, he actually did something about them. Like the Santa Clara law professor mentioned all the work he did while he was at law school. And even after passing the bar, he didn't go and do some highly paid job. He did an internship with the California Public Defender's Office in Sacramento. But apparently there are other good people in this world too, because that job is very hard to get, so he couldn't get a permanent job doing that. So instead he became he got a full-time job at the US Patent Office using both his engineering and law degrees and knowledge. It was a perfect combination for him, and I thought I wouldn't say this, but I'll say it because people are too serious. I think it's a conspiracy by some of these tech firms whose patents he declined. I think they did something to him. If you would like to believe in conspiracy theories, run with this one. George loved TV shows and movies. His absolute favorite, as many of us know, was It's a Wonderful Life. You might have heard his George Bailey imitation on KFJC. So every Christmas, the family would hunker down, we would settle down on a sofa, get the tissues ready, and we would all watch it together. And at some point, George would wipe away a tear. Every year, it never failed. He knew what to expect, but every year we would watch it. He would wipe away a tear, truly believing in the message that every human is important and has a contribution to make. To honor George, we have to believe that. Even though George is not physically with us. It's a wonderful life that we were fortunate enough to share it with George Atkins, Jr. He hated that name, right? It's not hard for me for saying it. Thank you for not throwing me off, Steve.
She always gets what she wants. You notice that? Hey George, how we doing? Pretty cool, huh? Leon did. Would you come up, please?
Leon Bibb. I'm married to Marguerite, one of his first cousins. And I've known George since, I guess George was about 5 when Marguerite and I started dating each other a long time ago in college. But I think that George Calvin Atkins was a river. Rivers have bends in the channel and twists and turns, but rivers are always moving forward. They're bound for the sea. I think for George, many of us were tributaries, feeding into George's river. His waters touched ours. In many ways, his waters still flow because they are now mixed with ours, as we said at the beginning this afternoon. And so our waters are mixed with George's waters. And as I look around here at all these folks from different aspects of his life, from family to friends and people from around the country, I realize that he really was very much a river that watered us all, one way or another. George, as the river, was bound for the sea. George was a river, never stopping until the very end. He was bound for the sea, where river waters and sea waters really become just one water.
Stefan, will you come up, please?
Hi everyone. My name is Stefan, and George was the husband of my Aunt Lori. Thank you all for being here. I'm lucky to call George one of my oldest friends. Some of my earliest childhood memories include him being healed by the palm of his hand and exchanging secret handshakes as I was growing up. George's warmth and energy were absolutely contagious. And I loved the way he would crack himself up as he told jokes and stories. I attribute much of my sense of humor to him, including sudden bouts of dancing and extremely goofy faces. George was truly a modern-day Renaissance man. He was proficient in languages both old and new, from Latin and Greek to Java and C++. He could execute a perfect handstand without breaking a sweat, and could play whatever instrument the situation called for. My memories of George inspire me to live life to the fullest. George played a huge role in shaping the person I am today, and I will carry his warmth and energy wherever I go. Thank you.
I'd like to read another poem. It's called Young Life Cut Short. Do not judge a song by the duration, nor by the number of notes. Judge it by the richness of its contents. Sometimes those unfinished are among the most poignant. Do not judge a song by its duration, nor by the number of notes. Judge it by the way it touches and lifts the soul. Sometimes those unfinished are among the most most beautiful. And when something has enriched your life, and when its melody lingers in your heart, is it unfinished or is it endless? Shay, would you come up, please?
Hi, my name is Shay McGilvery, and I first met George when he was a graduate student at UC Berkeley in electrical engineering, and I was a work-study student in the office. And he would come into the office and he would go from desk to desk and talk to everyone. And I thought, who is that guy? And then my very important job was to put the mail in the students' boxes, the graduate students' boxes. So I would be putting the mail in, and he had a little office across the hall, and he would pop out, and then he would say, come into my office and talk to me. And so then the next thing I knew, I was in his office talking to him, and then there would be a knock on the door. Is Shay in there? And it would be the ladies, one of the ladies from the office, dragging me back to my post, making sure that I was doing my job. And this happened over and over again. And that was in I believe 1988. And I didn't know then that George would become such a profound influence on my life. For me, it was his generous heart that means the most. He was patient and kind. He was so patient. I don't ever remember him losing patience with me, not even once. If he did, he kept it to himself. He was able to sustain such meaningful connections over a lifetime with so many people. I heard so much about all of you. And George had the memory of an elephant. He would help me remember things. He would often reminisce. He never lived in the past. He lived very much in the present, but he liked to remember things. And he would say, do you remember the person we used to know? Or, remember what we did? And I wouldn't remember until he brought it up and he reminded me. And he backed the cards, and he sent cards to my mother. He sent a Mother's Day card to my mother too. He sent birthday cards to my mother. And this my mom's birthday is in September, and George kept saying to me, he liked to tease me, did you send your mom the card yet? And I said, yes, I'm sending mine on Monday. And he said, okay, I'm sending mine on Monday too. So I called my mom Thursday, which was her birthday, and I said, did you get the cards? And she said, well, I got George's card. And then a few days later, she got my card, so I called George and I said, well, she got your card, and he said, well, you didn't mail yours at the post office. So, George kept track of me. He called me every day. We texted. He sent me all of those texts about the electric cars too, because he wanted me to get an electric car. That was going to be the next project that he was going to help me with. Anytime I needed help, he was there. Any problem I had, he helped me solve it. He knew if I was sad, he knew if I was sick. When he lived in Berkeley, he would bring me Gatorade and crackers when I was sick. We celebrated our birthdays every year. Mine's in December and his is in January. And I would say to him, just because I like to hear his response, and I probably started saying this when I was about 30 years old, but I would say, I'm getting old. I'm getting so old. And he would say, just enjoy it. Whatever age you are, just enjoy it. And I just like to hear him say that. So it's pretty impossible for me to wrap my mind around the fact that I won't be, in contact with him daily or seeing him ever again. I know it's hard for all of us. I loved him, and I'll miss him.
Sophia, would you go up, please?
Hi everyone. I'm Sophia. Okay, I actually really want to say this, so let me just. My wonderful mother gave the very long speech, and my brother a very nice short one, and probably be in the middle. So we're here today to commemorate George Atkins. He was in my family even before I was born. First with my brother, and then I came along. He was optimistic, comical, easygoing, let me not forget, handsome, companion, brother, and husband. I think we can all agree there was never a dull moment. I have so many memories with George. I'll just mention a few of my favorites. I know many people have mentioned his amazing handstands. Well, actually, I remember my own handstands that he would actually flip me up and I would walk on the ceiling. So that was his handstand for me. We've talked about his patience and his kind heart. My mother has always helped me with homework. She would say, have George help you. More when I was younger. I remember in middle school helping me with math. He would not get mad, and I was really confused. I was like, yell at me or something? But that actually, helped me want to teach other kids, and I ended up being a tutor just for a little bit and when I was in high school. He would always smile when he would walk into the room, and I would just like everyone to remember that we need to do that ourselves. We are talking so much about his good heart, his so many things. I'm kind of forgetting at the moment, but I think that instead of saying we'll never see it again, we should see it in ourselves. Many people ask me how I am so positive. I would actually say I'm a really optimistic person myself, and honestly, it's because why would I want to be remembered by anything else? And I know George would love all of the things we're saying at the moment about him. I'm going to speak on behalf of my aunt, Gory. George was a bright beacon of one embracing light. He unconditionally accepted all my quirks. And expressed his love in many different ways, some very subtle. My husband, my best friend, my guiding light, I will miss you. And I will miss you too, George. Thank you.
All right, my name is Adrian, and George was my uncle. I don't know how eloquent this will be, but I felt compelled to say something. I'm just really happy that he was able to come see me in Fort Lauderdale, he and Gary, a couple years ago. Had some really great memories, and I'm so happy that happened. This is what I have. I had no idea how many people George touched. I remember his quiet authority, his resolve just being content, being himself, and letting others be exactly who they were. I remember hours of playing hide and seek with us as kids, his handstands and bike rides. He could be infuriating because I couldn't get to him and get my way. He never judged me, and though I could be good at getting to the quick of people, I couldn't get under his skin. He always saw the good in people, and one of the last things he said to me was, "Adrian, you'd be a great lawyer. You really like to argue." His very Georgie way of saying, "Shut up, we get it." I am so fortunate to have had him as an uncle, and I'm all the better for having him love me.
Did you have a poem you wanted to read?
Yeah.
Before that, I just wanted to say, Bruce, just wow, that's really impressive. I think you were challenging George there in a way. It's amazing. Before I read this poem, I just wanted to say that, I really loved George and the way he cared for all of us. And especially how he focused on the kids, Stefan, Sophia, Max, and Katja, and also Lauren, who's here, and their well-being. And I think we've heard how so many people have loved George in different ways, in different venues, in different parts of his life. And I think there was a moment for me sometime after he graduated from law school where I gained this really deep admiration for George. And this was when he'd gone to Sacramento to work as a public defender, and he would come back and he would tell us stories of what that was like. And I don't know why this has stuck with me so deeply, but he would tell us about defending people who had been committed involuntarily on psychiatric grounds. So these are like 5150 hearings. And he would tell stories of somebody who was acting normally and kind of rationally, and then suddenly, in response to some question that George would pose, this person would just go off into some completely crazy rant. And then George, I mean, I can't tell you, I can't do that story the way George could do it, but he would say something like, no, you can't say that to the judge. I mean, he would get really this really astonished tone, like wide-eyed and no. And the thing is, the way George would tell that story just meant so much to me, actually, and told me so much about him. Because he was not hardened or cynical or horrified or dismissive of these people. He was compassionate, and he was caring, and he was strong and honorable and respectful. And I thought, that was George through and through in everything he did. So I tried to put together a poem which is in the program, which tries to capture a little bit of what it was like for us when George would come over to family parties. We'd be one of the first people there, and just to try to memorialize some of that for everyone. Will you come tonight through the door, fresh off your bike, or by bus, or by bolt? We wish to hear you laugh, embrace. The upright piano sounds, and then the party will begin. Around the island it goes. You touch everyone, one by one. They all know you celebrate them, one by one. They all know you are transcendent. We all know you are here with us today, forever. Your smile and innocence in everyone. We remember that playful dance and song you made of life, for us and with us. Today we gather hearts raised by you, for you, to see you off once more, knowing you'll return within us all. George, from the Greek for earth and worker, behold your miraculous works. Together our pasts and futures blend, renew.
One of the hardest jobs I have this afternoon is to try to keep us on time. That was one of Dory's requests. We have about 8 more people to speak. So if you could edit to 2 or 3 minutes, that would be wonderful. Heather, will you come up, please?
I am so thankful to have known George. My name's Heather Ann Gove. I am a public defender and I do public speaking, but this is not the same situation that I usually speak in. George was one of the first students of the Extended Clinic, and many of the stories that I've heard here today, George was a teacher to all of us. He mentored other students, he mentored clients, he mentored me. Part of the clinic class, we would actually interview clients, write pleadings, prepare for court hearings, and this was the first year my co-professor and I had taught this kind of a class. I had done several substantive law courses, but nothing like a clinic where you have to go into court. So there were ups and bumps and things in the road, and many of the students had clients with 35 or more prior convictions, and they had to write a pleading for each of those. So it was very challenging, and many people were stressed about getting the pleadings done, and then we had to copy them, and then we had to take them to the clerk's office. And then we had to file them, and if they weren't in perfect order or the clerk didn't like something, then we would have to go back and we would start all over again. And George was just our mentor. He was just calm. He kept everything going. After that first year, he became our research assistant, or our teaching assistant, because he knew how to handle that process. George's infectious enthusiasm for life is what I'll remember about him. And everyone I told who didn't know him in the past week, I said George was the most motivated, enthusiastic, and positive person I have ever met. George is truly genuine. I never saw him get upset. I never saw him treat anyone poorly. I never saw him yell. And if I, as people have spoken earlier, if I can live up to that, George, I'm going to follow you and I'm going to try my best. But truly, you will be missed. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy Gonzalez, will you come up, please?
Hello, my name is Kathy Gonzalez, and I'm actually going to start by reading something by Benjamin, who's a friend of George's, but wasn't able to be here today. Benjamin knew George through the gymnastics community, and he writes, "I am so sorry that I cannot join the public celebration of George's life. I will be trying to find equanimity with the loss of my friend and celebrating his life from across the ocean. George was a close friend and a central figure in my gymnastics social circle for more than a decade. When he wasn't at gym doing slow loves, he would be telling stories, imitating people with his own special voices, and giving out nicknames that the rest of us still use. His style was so contagious that we often tried to imitate him. George had so many qualities that I admired and respected: kind, thoughtful, curious, competent, charming, hilarious. He was also a true friend, and I loved him. Rest in peace, fellow Shanker. I knew George through Gari, who in the dance world we know as Shaheen. And we dancers have been sharing stories of George in the last couple weeks. And we all remember the day we first met him. It was a dance recital, and Shaheen and George danced together. Actually, George came up first wearing only black pants, no shirt, and he had a sword in his hands, and he posed with the sword. And we all went, my God, where has Shaheen been hiding him? And that was our introduction to George. And after that, he was the biggest fan of our troupe, Jewel of Opar. He always came to our gigs. He would film us or take photos of us. In fact, just a couple weeks before he passed, we had a gig in the Santa Clara Art and Wine Festival. And George sat with my 87-year-old mom so she wouldn't be alone. I mean, that's just the kind of person he was, to sit with my mom, and make her feel comfortable. He was so, he got along with everyone. He was kind and generous in those ways. And there are a couple of things in particular that made George so special and that I especially loved about him. He was so supportive of what everybody did. He was supportive of us as dancers. He was supportive of me as a writer. In fact, every time I would write something, he would buy it right away, and he'd read it, and then he'd talk with me about it, to the point that I didn't even know until 2 weeks ago that he had written a book. Like, he didn't talk about his own writing. He just wanted to support me and my writing. That's so rare. And yet that's really typical of the kind of person he was. And another thing that I admired so much about him was he was such a risk taker. All the things, all the instruments he played, all the martial arts, the gymnastics, belly dancing, he got up and belly danced with us, and he knew all the moves. We're like, how did George know how to do this whole choreography? If you see, there's a video that our dancer Claudia put together where George dances an entire choreography with us. He would just put himself out there and be goofy and just grasp life, like so many people have said. He was not afraid to live life to the fullest. And, especially since his passing, I'm realizing how very rare that is. And it makes me want to be more like him, to support others, to take those risks, to be silly and goofy, but to share love with others.
Thank you. Lauren, will you come up, please?
Hi, my name is Lauren. I know George through my best friend Sophia, so George has been a part of my whole life. My parents, you may know my parents, Ken and Jackie Munson. They couldn't be here today, but I will be speaking on their behalf. To all of the friends and family that know George, we all share the one thing that connects us, the love and friendship we all experienced in knowing him. I met George through my friendship with Rhea, then Gayatri, but we won't go there. Insert major eye roll if it were me, Jackie, reading this. We had the pleasure of living 2 houses over from Rhea, and our daughter Lauren became childhood best friends with Sophia. And you better believe that if Sophia were spending time in our home, as well as Rhea, well, George and Gowrie were part of the package. And for the Munson family, that was an exceptional added bonus, as we knew we hit the friendship jackpot. Over the years, as both Sophia and Lauren grew from toddlers to young girls to teenage girls and now college women, we watched in wonder the way George interacted with them. When they were little, he would get down on the floor and play with them, always eager to tap into his inner child. If Sophia wasn't home, Lauren would peek outside, and if George's car were there, she would ask if she could play with George. Sophia be damned. I genuinely believe when she was little, it never occurred to her that he was an adult in her eyes. He was an adult. In her eyes, he was a buddy and someone she could implicitly trust. As both girls got older, the questions he would ask would change, depending on where they were in their lives. But at the center of his friendship with Lauren, he was always a kid. He would always bring out the silliness in her and a guaranteed smile. Fast forward to our Lauren being 20, and she would still ask if Georgie would be there if she were on her way over to Ria's house, always excited to see him. What more can we say about a man who was always happy, who seemed so content in living in the present, who had a thirst for learning, not just about different topics or subjects, but about people? We can't find the right words, so we will say this: thank you. Thank you, George, from the bottom of our hearts, for loving our daughter and being a bright light in her life. Thank you, Gary, for loving our daughter as if she were your own. And thank you, Ria, for bringing George into our lives. We are better humans for knowing him. Thank you.
Jody, will you come up, please?
Hi, I'm Jody. I know George through Gayatri. I told her I would call her Ria if she would call me Vanessa. And she won't. Oh my gosh, to hear these stories is just amazing. It reminds me of the goodness that's possible in a human heart. What a special man. About, I think it was 10 or 11 years ago, I was doing some remodel on my house, and George had just gotten certified as an electrician, I think, or something along those skills. And he offered to drive over to Santa Cruz to help me. I was having trouble getting this baseboard heating system back online. And this was not just any baseboard heating system. This ran on the same voltage that your dryer runs on, 220. And so George was in at the thermostat, which was connected directly to 220, which just still seems really crazy. And I was out at the panel, the electrical panel, flipping the switch so that he wouldn't get electrocuted. And I ran back into the house, and he said, "Is it off?" And I said, "Yeah." And being George and so damn smart, he tested it. It was not off. I felt horrible. So, and I hesitated to tell this story, but George did not get upset. George is so careful and so always at peace. So thanks to George's good sense, we weren't here 10 or 11 years ago. They say only the good die young, and I believe that's true. If somebody has earned the Golden Heart Award, surely it is George. I don't know anyone kinder, more
positive and more loving than George Atkins.
Darling, thanks for not electrocuting George. Susie Fast, would you come up, please?
See if I have not found this.
Take what you need.
So it sounds like everybody is making a quilt called Life of George. Seriously, everybody's got a part. And the Fast family, of which you heard Alina's little piece there, this is the Fast family piece. It's different than y'all's. I was friends with George since 1981 when he showed up at Cornell Geology, and he was the photographer in the geology department, and I was the illustrator. So we became naughty people very quickly. It was good. But I never knew what I was encountering because I walked down the street to the bagel store with him. That's what you did in Ithaca. And on the way to the bagel store, it's only a block. I don't remember how many parking meters there were, but he leapfrogged over every one. I don't know. Wow, who's looking? But that's what he did. And in the winter, his little antic was, you all have looked at his shoes over there, right? Size 13, 14, whatever. In the winter, we have very steep hills like San Francisco. And he would walk uphill from his house. Of course, he walked up, about a mile and a half. And when he came home, he skied on the soles of his shoes. He collected friends. He collected accents. He loved having me talk to him because I worked very hard at this because I had a wicked bad Hoosier accent. And Hoosiers say things like one-syllable words are dragged out to two. Like that's a red flower. Oh man, he loved that. That's what he did, and that's how he learned people. You know, any nationality, he would learn how they talked. And apparently he did it even through radio. He had constancy, I think. He kept connections. Even when we moved to Michigan, he moved to New Mexico. He would come and visit for birthdays when all my kids were little. And the last one he did was he came from out here to Ithaca for Alina's wedding. And this was a major thing. It was the first time my family, some of which are a warring faction, but you know about those, they were all together and he got to see every single one of them. Special. Well, the thing about Alina and Berkeley, from the mother's standpoint, a kid moving to Berkeley, oh my God. And she was in the theater and she would work nights and she would get out at like 2 a.m. and walk home because she said it's just fine. And it was a sketchy neighborhood. And George would happen to be out for a late night walk. Night after night. Okay? And he would walk back. So he was her protector, her companion. A mother cannot ask for anything better, I think. So for my little family, he is permanently woven into the fabric of the Fast family. So thank you.
Nanda, would you come up, please?
Hi, my name is Nanda Kishore. I knew George through Ria and Gauri. And maybe a short, I wish I had spent more time with him based on everything that I'm hearing today. The thing I want to say is, first of all, I have admired him for the ability to do the things he has wanted to do. You know, my wife always makes fun of me for saying, I say, oh, I want to be a lawyer. Maybe I should be a lawyer or something, or maybe I should do this, maybe I should do that. and I don't do them. Latest ideas, and this is what happened. And all the things he has thought of, from writing a book, making a movie, becoming a lawyer in his mid-50s, and it's like there was no stopping. He wanted to do it, he's done it. And I think if more of us could do that, we'd have a great life. I admired him for his great sense of humor and quick retort. And one thing that comes to mind is, I think many years ago, I don't remember exactly when, there was a Richmond refinery had a flare-up. So they said that some air quality is bad, people have to worry about it, stay indoors, whatever. And this was pre-cell phone days, I think. So there was an email list going on. So I immediately blasted out an email saying, Ria, be careful, the air is bad. So I get a reply back from him immediately a second later. What? She's in Mountain View, and you're worried about her, and I'm in Berkeley, you don't care about me. So George, in my defense, the thing was, Ria was expecting, and I was very concerned about the baby, and that's why, otherwise he really cared about you and all of him. I did know geography, I did know Berkeley was very close to Richmond and but also knowing you, I knew you would know how to take care of yourself. So, that's my defense, but we did care about you a lot. So that's it, George, we really miss you.
Cynthia, would you come up, please?
My piece of the quilt. I'm Cynthia Shaler, and 3 years ago, just a little over 3 years ago, I met George. Like George, I've done a lot of different things, and here I was, starting something new again. U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. After years of being a patent attorney, here I am, deciding this was my thing that I needed to try. Something that I always actually kind of wanted to do. It's a rigorous training process. And there was George, the light. He was the teaching student assistant. He was my mentor from the very beginning. And as everyone has said, always with a smile. And not just for me, for absolutely everybody in the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. And I learned from him, became his friend. We both lamented when Barack Obama's picture was taken down from the front room. But I get to tell a little nerdy story about George. He was amazingly warm and loving, but he was also so inquisitive and so caring. And with all of my different jobs and everything that I've done in my life, I always traveled with my artwork and my plans. Well, he came in one day, and it was just like he was amazed. How do you get this plant to grow in this dark office? Well, I have a light, George. Well, do you think I could do it? Well, sure you could. So I cut him off a few sprigs, put it in a vase. I kind of like that vase, but I never got it back. He took it off to his office, but he had all these questions for me on what to do, on how to do it, and I said, George, put it in the window, it will grow. And it did. And then he had to plant it, and we got to talk about soil and pots. And then he got worried once it was gorgeous, it's in too little of a pot, I'm gonna take it home. So he takes it home. And I said, well, George, later on, how's the plant doing? Well, my wife kind of likes the plant. Can I have a few more sprigs? So, plant number 2, and it was just George. He loved loving, he loved loving, he loved living, and he cared for every human being, for every plant. that crossed his path. And I'm so grateful that I got to know and care and love George.
All right. Cal Gymnastics Club.
Hi, so I'm Patrick McCarthy. This is my wife, Willow, Benita, Lena, Ellie, Gonzo, Chicky Baby, and Tom, and Cheryl, and Jessie.
Real names?
So I kind of switched. So I'm Batman, Llama, Plum, Buffy,
JJ.
JJ. So I already said Gonzo, but he's Mike Sachs, Chicky Babies, Heather, Slinky,
Tom
and Mohawk. I used to have a mohawk, and I didn't know if you had it.
Yeah, Copper gave me Copper Top.
Copper Top, okay. And I don't know if you want to say it. Jessica.
Sure.
I've heard several different nicknames for Jessie, so I can't say. So I've known George since about 1991 when he first started. He actually started a week before me at the gymnastics club. I was on the Cal team before that, and I had lots of injuries, and I took a break and then came back and started in the club. But yeah, so I also lived about a block away from him in Berkeley, so I had lots of dinners after the club with him and walks home, lots of fun talks, and became really good friends with him. He was the best man I'd ever met, and he gave the best speech ever. I mean, it was good, George. He started by kind of just saying how Leela and I met, and then he went into an impression of me whining. Hey, George, do you think she likes me? Do you think she'd go out with me? Later, do you think she'll marry me? So he had an impression for just about everybody, which, you know, I'm sure you all have experienced that. And then he went in and, you know, continued the speech, and he gave a bunch of wide-eye expression things, and he gave an imitation of Cupid shooting an arrow, even with the sound effect and everything. And he gave a quote about kind of how, you know, two people become one. But before he gave it, I think Tom asked if he could give it in Latin. I think it was Tom. And so he read it in Latin first, you know, and then he read it in English. But you know, it was just George. I mean, everything about it was very much how I remember it. And I'll miss him a lot.
George was one of the first friends I made when I joined the Berkeley Gymnastics Club. I had just moved to Berkeley from Ohio, and I didn't really know anyone in Berkeley. And soon, the gymnastics club really became my best friends and my family. And a lot of the reason for that was because of George. He was always so welcoming and so inviting and inclusive, which really said a lot if you knew the characters who have wandered in and out of the dress. But it didn't really matter who they were. George was friends with all of them. And he was also great at just like not just in the gym, but outside of the gym, and like going out to dinner afterwards. And he was always hosting parties and get-togethers, which I think really brought us all together closer, doing more than just gymnastics together. We were all really great friends. And then later on, over the years, when gymnastics club. A lot of us lost touch. I mean, some of us haven't talked to each other much over the years, except I think we all kept in touch with George because George would always reach out to us and text us and send us birthday cards and Valentine's Day cards. And every now and then he would organize reunions and dinners and get-togethers, and I'm not sure some of that would have happened without him. So I will really miss him.
It's very, very brief.
The first time I met George, I'd been in Berkeley for about a week. I ended up going to a gymnastics meet with them. And I remember him doing giants on the high bar, full handstands all around. He got off and he chest bumped a pole.
I first met George when I started college at Berkeley, and at the time our club had a thing called community members, and as you can see, I think George really embodied that and made the community what it was. And I was always impressed that George could do those giants when I couldn't, since I was 15.
George was the heart of the gymnastics club. He had this spirit that brought everybody together, as everybody's saying. And I really enjoyed the dinners that we had afterward at Tuck Tuck Tie, and we'd all get together and laugh, and those funny like insider jokes that he always had. And it wasn't even necessarily like a thing, like, what are you going to be for Halloween? You know, he's going to be greatly missed.
George inspired me to go both ways. That's one of George's jokes. We used to do circles on the pommel horse on a mushroom to practice. And George had this idea, why don't we try going in the opposite direction? And that's George. And it was crazy on your mind to try and switch your brain to do something differently. And as I think about him, I realize that's what it's like to be in George's head. What's new, what's interesting, what's different and challenging. I miss him.
George came to our wedding as well, and he recorded a video, and so it's the only copy we have. But that,
Yeah, just like so many people here, George absolutely changed my life. I watched him, he didn't need to go back to law school, and have a second career. I saw him do that, and I thought, oh, if George is doing it, that's got to be a great idea. Those are seriously famous last words. But I think he's made so many of us to be, see the best in other people and try to find the best within ourselves. And I'll be grateful to him for the rest of my life.
I had the pleasure to kind of get George going in gymnastics, coaching and spotting him when he first arrived. And gymnastics at an older age is not an easy thing to start, so he deserves a lot of credit for how he did advance enough to actually compete in meets. I guess that when I try to think about George, I'm trying to think of some good adjectives, and I would say accomplished is an important adjective for him. And fun-loving. The guy just always managed to try to find a way to put some fun into things, yet still, get his business taken care of. So very much appreciate the joy he brought to all of us.
Just to add to what everyone else has already said, it's been years since I've been to the gym. Well, especially since I had a couple kids, so probably more than 5 years, but still, I'll miss the text messages that I once got on March 21st, and Gonzo and I had the same birthday, so we always had those joint birthday text messages that would come out of the blue. So someone will have to take that over. And I have to say, I remember those giants, and that's like a pretty impressive skill. And I look over, I remember when I didn't know George very well, I was like, how old is that guy? Of course, he was amazing in so many ways.
I just want to say I'm going to miss him.
Thank you, everybody. We thought we might end with some handstands.
I'm super sorry about the dress, but I think George would want it this way. I was halfway prepared.
We apologize if we crashed on you.
There's a lot of
everybody. Ronald, I've got one last story. It was at a dinner, I don't know how long ago, 10 years, something like that. And George was telling us about, it must have been when he was a public defender, and he was talking about how he was at a psych clinic. And he was saying, you know, when you really listen to these people and get into their heads, they're not crazy at all. They're very logical. And I thought, wow, that's an interesting observation. And as he was leaving, this little lady came up about that high with kind of a crazed look in her eye. And she said, oh, it's such an honor to meet you, Mr. Obama. Would you all please stand up? Georgie, we're going to give you a send-off here, bud. So I'd like to ask us all to do 3 I love you, George. We'll do 3 of those, and after that, let's make a lot of noise. With me?
Yep.
Okay.
I love you, George! I love you, George! I love you, George!
On behalf of George's family and all of us here, Georgie, we loved you, and we'll love you till the day we die. We have food available in the other room. We're told that we shouldn't eat in here, and we have this space until 4 o'clock.
Yes, I can address something. So we have George's favorite food, so please don't leave without having it. We have carrot cake, his favorite cake. We have pumpkin pie. He would always come over with a pumpkin pie, sometimes on a bike, sometimes not. And we have apple pie, so those were his favorite cakes. And we have popcorn. Please look at the table to see all of his favorite things if you haven't yet. And please have popcorn and all of the other snacks, because otherwise it'll just go to waste, and George would really, really hate that, right? So please.
Thanks, everybody.